Hey guys, Cam here from PhoneDog.com, and while Samsung may have dominated the Android market share over the past few years, two manufacturers have really impressed me with their build quality and design. And that's Motorola and HTC. It's no surprise that Google chose the former to create its Nexus 6 last year. And it's also no surprise that HTC's One series regularly wins Best Smartphone of the Year across the globe. So I decided to compare the latest HTC One with the latest Moto X from last year. HTC has been criticised by many for not changing its look dramatically enough with the HTC One M9. It looks very similar to last year's M8 with its all-metal body, hairline, brushed metal finish on the back and boom sound speaker grills on the front. But then how do you improve something that was already so good? In contrast, while the Motorola has a solid metal frame, the device makes great use of other materials, and which materials is entirely down to the buyer. You can customize it with wood, leather or plastic. If you're not a fan of the cold feel of metal, Motorola gives you the option to choose more palm-friendly materials. Add that to the gently curved and tapered back and you have a phone that's so comfortable in hand it almost feels like it belongs there. As for the HTC, like its predecessor, it looks fantastic, but I'm not convinced by its in-hand feel. The new dual-tone gold and silver finish really is beautiful in person, but the gold metal frame has its disadvantages. It doesn't sit flush with the front panel and creates this mini ledge of around 0.5 millimeter. And you do notice it when holding the phone, as it gives a sort of sharp, rough feel. That said, the device itself feels incredibly solid, and it sits fairly comfortably in hand and has lost a lot of the slipperiness I found with the M8. Both phones have their volume and power buttons on the right edge, and again the Motorola setup is preferable. I often pressed the wrong button with the HTC One M9. The power key was too close to the volume ones and should be above the volume buttons in my opinion. One other disadvantage for the HTC is that its huge bezel and boom sound speakers take up far too much space on the front. So despite being 4mm taller, its screen is 0.2 inches smaller. I'm giving this round to the Moto X. You can make it look the way you like, it feels great in hand and makes great use of the front by putting in a larger screen. Which leads us nicely onto the display. Both phones sport Full HD 1080 by 1920 resolution displays. In terms of pixel density, they're so similar you won't really notice the difference. It's 441 pixels per inch on the HTC One versus 424 pixels per inch on the Moto X. The resolution is the only way these two phones are similar. In terms of colours, contrast and experience, they're vastly different. Previous HTC One displays had a good reputation for being full of life and colourful. Even contrast was good. But on the M9 I can't help but feel they've gone a step backwards. The screen doesn't impress next to any of today's flagships from Apple, Samsung, Sony or even the Motorola. While its colours may be quite accurate, the display doesn't seem as bright as the Motorola's. It's much cooler and lacks contrast. It's hard to say this, but it's pretty dull and faded. That said, whites are very crisp and clean, refresh rate is smooth and viewing angles are terrific. Sure, the Moto X screen could be criticised for being oversaturated, and whites are a little yellow, but the blacks are incredibly dark, almost blending into the black frame of the phone. And for gaming and movie watching, there's a lot to please the eye. I also love the way the content looks like it's floating on the glass. It's the same old battle of LCD versus AMOLED, except the strengths and weaknesses on each technology are shown to the extreme with the Moto X and HTC One. For me, I'm going with the larger size, the inky blacks and the liveliness of the Moto X. That's not to say the HTC has a poor display, I just don't think HTC has improved its game enough since last year, at least not on the screen front. If there's one weak point shared on the two devices, it's the camera. The Motorola has a 13 megapixel snapper while the HTC uses a 20.7 megapixel sensor. And while the pixel count is much higher on the HTC, it's not that great. If the HTC One M9 has anything going for it, it's speed. This thing takes pictures rapidly with barely a pause between pressing the on-screen shutter button and the picture saving to the device's gallery. Focusing is generally quick too, but it does tend to overexpose images in most light. This results in images that are often too bright and a little washed out. But the same can be said of the Motorola. Some images came out a little crisper on the HTC One, while others had a tiny bit more depth in the Moto. All in all, it's really hard to separate the image quality when used for general day-to-day snapping. If I had to choose one for the overall experience, I'd go with the HTC One because it's slightly better and slightly quicker, and also records video in 4K. There's really no contest when it comes to performance and battery life. HTC's Snapdragon 810 octa-core processor is super fast. Animations and transitions between screens and loading apps is really fast. In fact, I'd go as far as saying for general use, this is the speediest phone I've used. And that's despite the fact that it has Sense UI over the top and Motorola's is virtually stock Android. And the standard Geekbench results confirm that the 1.5 GHz octa-core processor in the One M9 is faster in both single-core and multi-core performance. And that's not to say the Moto X is terrible. Until I powered up the HTC One, I was happy with the performance I got from the quad-core 2.5 GHz Snapdragon 801. But next to the HTC, it feels like it lags just a tiny bit. Animations don't seem quite as smooth or instantaneous, and that's probably not helped by the fact that it has 1GB less RAM than the HTC One. And it's a similar story with battery life. While the HTC One should get you through a day's use with its 2840 mAh battery, the Moto X struggles to get to the end of a workday. Using it as my daily driver, the Moto X regularly needed plugging back into a power source by 5 PM, and the HTC lasted until at least bedtime. It's no surprise then that this round also goes to the HTC One M9. And we're into the fifth and final category, sound. And HTC's One M9 has won 2 rounds and the Moto X has won 2. But like the performance and battery life round, the sound quality round is no competition. Both phones have stereo front-facing speakers, but the Dolby-powered boom sound speakers on the One M9 blow the Motorola away. It's not just that they're much louder, they also have a more immersive feel and a better tone. Bass, middle and treble are all balanced in a way you wouldn't expect from a phone's loudspeakers. At the right distance from your face, they truly add an element to your media consumption that you don't get from any other device. Also, you'll never miss a notification again with the sound on. Did I mention they are really loud? Sound round goes to the HTC One M9. With that final round, the HTC One M9 finishes with 3 victories against Motorola's 2. Judging from those scores, then the HTC One M9 is the better phone. As an overall package, it is super. Yes, I would improve the display and I would improve the camera, but its performance, battery life and sound quality are superb. As a side note, I still love my Moto X, especially because of that leather feel in hand. And it is fast, and it feels great, and it works really well, and in fact it is one of my favourite devices ever made. And if I was going to replace it with anything, the HTC One M9 is probably the closest thing to doing it right now. As long as I could find a leather skin to put on the back. I've been Cam, I'm at phonedog_Cam on Twitter. You can follow me there, ask me questions, give me suggestions, and don't forget to leave your comments, subscribe and click that thumbs up. And I'll see you again soon.